This is me, heart and soul. Here's a part of me the world may never know. Here's my story. When I lose, I let my guard down. Here's the naked truth. I let my guard down. Here's the naked truth. I let my guard down. I let my guard.
My people, this is your boy Monroe, aka He Smiles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Naked Truth Experience. Halfway through December, only 2 more weeks left in 2020, and yes, y'all, we are headed into 2021. But you know what we've been doing all this month here on the Naked Truth Experience? We've been taking a trip down memory lane, and I've just been reaching back and pulling out some of these episodes from the vault, some gems, and some conversations that I thought we should hear again. And I've been loving the conversation that's been happening since re-airing these episodes, and we're getting to update and find out where some of our guests are and what they're doing and what are their thoughts on what we originally talked about. So this week is going to be another wonderful look back into the Naked Truth Experience history. And before we get into that and I introduce the episode, I want to, as always, encourage you to please like, share, and subscribe, y'all. We need your support to continue this effort to make sure that the Naked Truth Experience, that message keeps going, right? And we're spreading it. But also I want you to use your voice and to get into our Naked Truth Experience Facebook group. Yes, go ahead and also make sure that you like and you subscribe to the Facebook group so we can continue the conversation. All right. Now, as I promised, we've got another throwback. And this week we are bringing someone who is no stranger to the Naked Truth Experience. She is someone who I admire, love, and care about very deeply, and who has personally inspired me in many, many different ways. And we're going to be talking about a subject that is very, very important and near and dear to my heart. And I know a lot of our viewers can really identify with this episode. And we're talking about healing church hurt, and with the Reverend Kendra Frazier. And I'm so grateful to have her expertise and her insight on this conversation. But it's also amazing because within this episode, we have some other wonderful contributors who tell their story of healing church hurt. My good friend from grad school, Sherry, and then also another brother who is out there doing his thing on the West Coast in California, my brother Cameron. He's going to talk about his story and coming up and healing church hurt. So you are in store for another in-depth, raw healing conversation. So here we go. Let's talk about it. Church hurt. I'm gonna let that ride until I get my sister on the screen. Yes.
Peace.
Listen, how are you today?
I'm well and grateful. How are you?
Listen, I'm heavy. I'm not even gonna lie. You know, we make space for that, and
you and your loved ones.
Thank you. I just, man, I don't even want to go into it because I'm gonna cry. But your face and your energy and your presence, I've been looking forward to all day because I know that I was going to be able to get on here and just talk some healing
and also talk some reality here. And sometimes when we have to face the reality, that's part of our healing. That's the start of our healing journey. So I want to welcome you for the first time as a guest
Yes.
to the Naked Truth Experience, because you are no stranger, because you've been here before, all in them comments, and when I see it, I love it. And we've been working on this for a minute, y'all. I've been trying to get my beautiful sister on, and she has so graciously let me know what her schedule was, and she has honored her word, and she is here today, and I'm excited. And we are talking about something that is very important in regards to talking about religious trauma, and some might just call it church hurt. And so I just kind of want to dive right in now. You are a licensed clinician, but you're also an ordained minister, correct?
Yes.
You're a spiritual thought leader. And so before we get started, I want to know why, like, how is this showing up in your practice? Because I sat in on one of your seminars, and again, she can talk about the seminars that she's doing with Kind and Free. And I wanted to know, you've done one on church hurt and continuing to talk about this. Why is this so prevalent? Why is this so important? And where is this showing up in your life, in your practice?
Okay, great question. Thank you for having me on, Monroe. Shout out to all the beautiful people who join in on your platform. It's so necessary. So thank you for doing what you do. To answer your question, I started being more intentional about exploring what religious trauma is in 2000, I would say 13, 14. And it stems from an experience I had in 2010 while I was serving at a level 1 trauma center in Atlanta through clinical pastoral education after seminary, when I met this young man who was 23 years old, African American, who had came in because he attempted to castrate himself.
Wow. Yeah.
And I was sitting with the interdisciplinary team, and they warned me not to go to his room because his family was fairly peculiar and very fundamentalist in the way they engage religion, and may not welcome a female clergy person showing up. But I did.
Right.
Because I was concerned and wanted how I could support as the chaplain on the surgery ICU unit. And so when I went to go visit the young man, he began to delve into his discomfort with having this same gender attraction and integrating it with his spirituality. I sensed that he most likely was experiencing a psychosis too. He felt like God had called him to be a eunuch because of his same gender attraction. And in addition to that, he was also seeing a eunuch outside of his room. So it was that experience that made me understand that as a clergy person, I did not have the skill set that I needed to support him effectively. So I went to social work school to be a better spiritual leader.
Okay.
So he experienced, a lot of people say church hurt. We are talking beyond church hurt at this point. I'm not talking about an experience that you have at church where somebody hurts your feelings and you can move on. I'm talking about trauma. Religious trauma syndrome is a term that was coined by Marlene Wynell, who's a white psychologist out in California over 2 decades ago. Marlene works predominantly with European American folks who typically, through her research, shows that they leave the church and ultimately leave God. That has not been my experience as a Black person or other Black people who grew up in a church who've experienced trauma. So religious trauma syndrome is the experience that one has when they are dealing with the damage of indoctrination and leaving the authoritarian or controlling religious institution or community they've been attached to. Right. So in the research, Marlene likens the symptoms to complex post-traumatic stress disorder. It's just that serious. And unfortunately, they don't have religious trauma syndrome codified in our diagnostic and statistic manual as clinicians. So if you look for RTS in a DSM-4 or 5, you're not going to see it. And it should be in there. Some of the causes of religious trauma syndrome are suppression of normal childhood development. Because typically when you grow up in faith institutions that are not only fundamentalist, but that are cultish, where you can only be with that particular community, You can only fellowship with that particular community, and the religious faith speaks against living in the secular world. So you can't do things like go to school dances or go watch movies or listen to secular music, so on and so forth. It also damages normal thinking and feeling abilities. So that means that information is typically limited or controlled by the person in authority, typically the pastor or the spiritual leader. It also, in terms of causes, disrupts your external locus of control. And that means knowledge is revealed and not discovered. And because knowledge is revealed and not discovered, it is revealed by the person in authority and not discovered by you. So
wait, hold on, Reverend Kendra, hold on 1 second,
yeah.
because let me tell you, listen, I know y'all, listen, y'all better get your notepads out, because she's dropping knowledge. What I want to do though, because you said some things. First of all, we've moved beyond just church hurt, and you were talking about a young man who wanted to castrate himself, to physically harm himself in such a brutal way, right? Yeah. And so I just want to break down real quick. And we were talking about this piece around he felt like God had wanted him to be a eunuch. What is it? And then going into some of the things in the way in which we see. So like there is this one authority figure in the church, the pastor maybe, or the deacon board, or the trustee, whoever's maybe, you know, because I know in Black church, a lot of times there are movers and shakers sometimes other than the pastor that have the potential to, you know, invoke mandates and so on and so forth. So you say this central control, you talk about removing the locus of control, right? Is the central figure, and then removing the locus of control. And then you talk about not being able to develop like naturally or normally in the adolescence. So for someone who is hearing all this and like, whoa, what does that sound like, and what does that look like? And let's go to in the Black church. What does that sound like and look like? So somebody might be like, well, that seems like a lot. I didn't experience that. But what could that sound like and look like for the average person?
It could sound like and look like one sitting in the pulpit and being exposed to poor theological suppositions that tell you you're going to hell because of a same-gender attraction. It can look like and sound like you sitting in the pews and someone telling you that you should not do X, Y, and Z because God forbids it. Better yet, because it's in the Bible and it's written in the Bible. A document that was created for a specific group of people by a specific group of people. The Bible is not a universal historical document. If children of Israelite and how they were making meaning from their experience and relationship with God. So can we just stop right there? Because that's
listen, you know I'm about to, because listen, you had already, you know, folks is like, what? Listen, but here's the thing though, for a lot of people, we've grown up, and you use the word indoctrination, we've grown up that because the Bible says it, and now not giving any context, by the way, not giving context. Folks is real good for that. But this is what the word says. So that means you can't do X, Y, and Z, and that if you do, you are going to hell. So for individuals who've been indoctrinated with this from the day we could remember, and what we were listening to and what we were exposed to, and because grandmama says it because the preacher told her, and then, you know, mama says it because grandmama said it and the preacher told her too, daddy said, whatever the case may be, we're taking this down. How in the hell am I supposed to go against what the word says, what the pastor said? How do I even wrap my head around that? Because if the pastor tells me I'm going to hell, like, how do I even come against that?
Ooh, that is a tough question, and I can only speak from my experience. How I came out of it was being clear that I needed to deepen my relationship with God and not my religion or the church. That is how I became clear. I finally had a conversation with God, particularly about my own same-gender attraction, in ways that I had not before, where I finally asked God, so God, I mean, I prayed, I fasted, I've done all the fucking things that I was told that I needed to do, and this shit has not left me yet. So what's up?
Yeah.
Finally, I said this to God, and just as clear as I'm talking to you, Spirit was like, Kendra, I've always been okay. You never asked me. What?
Wow.
What?
Wow.
You mean I've been relying on voices outside of me for almost 23 years? And it is because I haven't talked to you directly that I've been struggling like this?
Wow.
Blew my mind. That freed me up.
So the relationship, the emphasis and the focus on the relationship with God Himself was the key to for you and your path. And I'm going to throw myself in there because I went through a lot of the same things, but it wasn't until I began to take my eyes off the institution and really put my eyes, because here's the thing, I never wanted to leave the church. I didn't want to leave the tradition and the connection that I had with God, or what I thought the church to be. You know what I'm saying? And I want to be real about that, because for me, I talk about all the time, you know, the Black Baptist church or the Black church tradition is a cornerstone for me in many ways, right? And so when people say, oh, okay, well, you just bashing the church. No, that's not what I'm here about, because there are so many things. There was nurturing that I got in the church. There was love that I got in church. There was community that I got in the church. But that doesn't mean everything was okay, which was coming across the pulpit or which was being whispered in the pews. So now, just because I got all that, so I don't have to throw all of the beautiful, wonderful things away and still be critical of the things that were toxic, of the things that were not okay, right? So here's this piece. I didn't want to leave that tradition, because as it stands today, a Hammond B3 does something to me.
It does something for me,
So I think there's a lot of, so when we talk about focusing on the relationship, and that's actually what then allowed me to stay within, and to specifically, though, begin to seek out spaces and houses of worship that would affirm me, right, as a whole person, right? And so I just wanted to put that out there, because there's many people where it feels like because you've experienced religious trauma, it is a complete disconnection, or has to be a complete rejection of God.
Right.
And can you speak to that a little bit? Because I'm sure many people may come to you and say, I'm mad with God. I hate God because of what the people did.
Yeah, absolutely. Most, again, like I said, the research that Marlene Wynell has been doing with white folks shows that they leave the church and leave God. To me, anecdotally, the Black women and men that I have worked with from across the spectrums of orientation and gender identity, usually, like you and I, don't leave. They find a way to reframe their relationship with God and with the institution of the church. So let me first start by saying that. And one way that I believe folks began to deal with religious trauma syndrome is really by accepting that, wow, the people that I put all this trust in, one, were not only wrong, but they were two, abusive. Wow. And this also, while I'm talking, it comes to mind that there may be people watching who are sexually abused by their spiritual leaders. And I want to take a moment to identify that as religious trauma. And there are so many that are sexually abused by pastors and spiritual leaders, particularly within the Black church, where we go silent about it, because like we experience at home, your spiritual leader may tell you, if it happened here, it stays here. Wow. And they even may use God as to why they are doing the things that they're doing with you. It can even look like a grown person being groomed by a spiritual leader to get into a sexual relationship with you. That is a misappropriation, one, of scripture, and two, of power. So this is how, and I don't even know what question you asked, but
no, keep going. You good.
Because it's too many people that I sit with who have had inappropriate relationships with pastors because of the lack of transparency around sexual health in Black church spaces, around the importance of sacred sexuality I'm not talking about abstinence. I'm talking about for those of us that are interested in having sex and how to have it in healthy ways that minimize risk. Yeah. Oftentimes, these pastors are doing what they're doing when they are sexually abusive, as well as emotionally abusive, is covering up their own insecurities because they're struggling in some type of way.
Come on.
If we could all be honest about our desires, the church would be in a much better place.
Listen, okay, Kendra, because you already know we could go. I know, sis. Listen, I know. But let me pose this to you, and I wanna get one of our guests on the line, and she's gonna share her story. And just to segue into her story, what about women and the degradation and the role that church has played? We've talked a lot about, LGBTQIA, same gender loving. What are your thoughts on women and the religious trauma specific to women in the church?
It's pervasive. The system of patriarchy is real. Women do the work and get none of the praise typically, or the clout. Most churches are made up of 80% women. And so that goes to show who's doing the work. Unfortunately, because of the divine feminine, there being an erasure in most Black churches.
Okay, come on, yeah.
And faith communities in general, we don't leave room for women bodies, whether that's trans women or cisgender women. We don't make room for that because we're so used to viewing God as a he, as a man, not understanding that creation takes both energies. And so, which is why our world looks the way it looks right now, is because we're in a massive imbalance. And not only is our governmental leadership being called to order and balance, but so is the church. I believe that in the next coming months, you will see an uprise of more women who have been disenfranchised by the church, who operate in spiritual leadership, coming out and speaking out about the atrocities that have been done. Because it is time for the divine feminine to be brought back into our faith space. That's the only way that balance can happen, that healing can happen, that the restoration and transformation that people are looking for can be birthed and made manifest.
Where your church at? Where you still?
Y'all check me out on my Facebook page. My name is Kendra Frazier on there for Movement Mondays. Every Monday at 10 a.m. I'm on.
Listen, so I want to get to Sherry, but are you able to stick around?
Yeah, I'll be here.
You're sticking around, okay?
Yeah,
listen, because I know what I want to do is when Sherry and then we've got Cameron coming on after that. I definitely want to just close out with you.
Yeah.
Listen, it is 9:26, everybody. I'm saying this as a PSA. It's 9:26. If y'all can hang with me, maybe just 15 minutes after the 10 o'clock hour, because I need to wrap up with Reverend Kendra Frazier after we hear from these next two individuals who are going to share their naked truth about their experience with religious trauma. And so just want you to stick around. Sis, Reverend Kendra Frazier, thank you so much for just opening us up on fire. Oh gosh, there's so much more. Y'all give some hearts there, and then let me go on to Sherry, and we're gonna come back to you, okay?
All right.
I love you. All right. Listen, I told you. There's so much that is coming up in there. Please be active in those comments there. Here we go. Sherry, I'm coming to you right now. Cameron, if you're in the room, I'll be coming to you, brother, after I talk to Sherry.
Hi.
Hey,
can you hear me?
I can hear you. How are you? I can see you. I know you're on the road. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly.
Okay. Listen, I want to dive right in, Sherry. First of all, thank you. This is my homegirl from grad school. We were in social work school together, and she's a wonderful clinician working with families and families of substance abuse.
Yes, I work in an addiction treatment center.
Got you. Okay. So this woman, and here's what I want us to understand, right? Like even individuals who like us who go into this work of working with individuals around their healing, we all have to do our own healing. So I was very, very
That's right.
appreciative of the fact that Sherry and all of her expertise is transparent enough to say, listen, I too have been someone who's been impacted by church hurts, by religious trauma, as Reverend Kendra Frazier opened this up with. So Sherry, let's dive in. Tell me a little bit about your history with the church. How did the church play a role in your upbringing?
Thank you, Monroy, for inviting me. Like I told you when we spoke last week, this subject it's been on my mind for a long time, in the sense of like being part of like the journey of healing for me, because I've had to heal through a lot of my own childhood trauma for a long time, you know, being an active participant in my own therapy for years. But in relationship to like what happened to me growing up, I grew up in a non-denominational church, like born again Christian. I'm the product of of parents that were immigrants that came from Colombia, a family that, you know, fled the violence of Colombia for a long time and came to this country for new opportunities. And with that came being born again into the faith. And so I grew up in a church that was, you know, very fundamental in a lot of ways, like as Dr. Kendra spoke earlier, which I have to say was just an amazing what she was saying, because as she was talking about it, I was like, oh my God, I didn't even notice that I felt so like institutionalized in the way I was raised, because I never saw it. I just thought that this was my norm, this is my world, and this is how things are. And so for a long time, I came across hurdles or bumps, because even as I got married, my husband not having the same experience in a church, not spiritually, but in the church, and not having that same experience, you know, he couldn't understand it, and I would be like, oh, you don't get it, because it really was like a bubble. For a very long time. I was raised in a church here. I grew up in New York City, in Queens, and so part of what occurred to me was I was about 16 years old, and I had a boyfriend at the time in the church. I was part of the dance team. He was part of the worship team. You know, teenagers that were like, we were both devoted to like worshiping God and being a participant in our church and being with the church family, what brings you so much connection and love and all of these things. And, you know, like normal teenagers engaging in outside of marriage sex. And so in me one day confiding in my spiritual leader, being conflicted at that age, right? Because I'm going through these very normal teenage hormones, really normal developmental experiences that I was going through. And on the other token, hearing how, like, you know, being this is sinful, that this is against God, these things were terrible. And at that point, being in a battle within myself, but then for me, the real trauma was then later my spiritual leader going and telling on me, like going and telling the church what I engaged in, and then later being brought in front of a panel of all men, and one of those persons being someone that was close to me, which was a family member who was a pastor at the time, and having this interrogation that felt completely it violated it just brought on so much shame, you know, for this experience that I look back now in hindsight and realizing that it was a totally normal 16, 17-year-old experience that every other normal teenager goes through. Yeah. But having to sit there and go and divulge the most intimate details of your life to this panel of men, it was traumatizing. It was completely...
Sherry, so you mean to tell me that as a 16, 17-year-old, you were called in to sit in front of a panel of all men, adult men, correct?
Yes, adult men.
Adult men, one of being someone who was part of your family and who was also a leader in the church. And you were interrogated and asked intimate details about this encounter.
Yes, it was, you know, days, times, what happened, you know, I mean, when I say it was an interrogation, it was a complete, like, what happened, how did it happen, how many times did it happen, going into specific details, me being alone, you know, just to bring it into context. I was alone. I didn't get my parent there. I didn't get anyone. No one even knew. All I know is I'm showing up to my regular Sunday service like I normally do, and I'm being told like, hey, there you need to come into like the section of the church, like the administrative offices, because there's a meeting and they need to speak with you.
And was the young man also pulled into this same type of interrogation?
Not that I was when it happened with me, it was just me. He wasn't there. I never saw what happened. I know that from what I understand, I mean, it's been such a long time now. It's almost close to over 13 years ago, almost 15. But you know, what I remember, what I had heard later on, because I received like a punishment. I was no longer allowed to be part of the dance team, the dance ministry. And he, along, because it was like it was a group of us, our spiritual leaders were confiding in like our cell groups, and it was like, weekly Bible study. So when I confided what I confided, it was more than one of us that had confided with the spiritual leader what had happened. And so it wasn't just me, it was several people that were later, I know like a couple of them were like suspended, right? But I was only, from what I was aware of at the time, of purview of information was that I got like suspended, but my back then boyfriend didn't get suspended. He continued being in part of the worship team.
So there was this imbalance of recourse in any way for this indiscretion. I'm putting all of this in quotations here.
Mm-hmm.
There's an imbalance in the fact that you were the only one who received this type of punishment for this indiscretion. So we definitely, and I know the audience understands this here. Now, where did that take you? You are 17 years old. From that experience that you had, now there's a betrayal of trust. You confided in someone in the church.
Yes, wholeheartedly.
There's this inappropriate questioning of you as a young person by a committee of grown men about intimate details, especially when a young girl is discovering her own sexuality and understanding her body and all this other kind of stuff, normal development. All this happened. How did that impact you going forward? What were some of the things that you experienced in your feelings, emotions, even the actions going forward?
At that point, I just turned my back. I couldn't tolerate it. It was so painful. It was so, there were no words to describe exactly the experience that I felt in that moment. I remember feeling so betrayed. That's exactly, I remember walking away and never looking back. I didn't step foot back into a church. A couple of years later, by this point I was a single mom, and I wanted my son to still have that, but there was so much pain there. I could never bear myself to be involved again. I couldn't be and because in particular, to me, for my situation in particular, this individual that was a family member who was someone I looked up to, I'm really close to him, and we have a relationship, and he is still part of my life in a lot of ways, not my spiritual leader, but as my family member. And still having to see him and interact with him and know that this experience happened, in some ways, like, I felt like I had also like turned my back on God, because I felt so betrayed. I felt like there was this, why me? That's what I felt for a long time. Why me? Why did it have to happen to me? Why did this experience happen to me? It made me feel for years this huge amount of shame related to sex, things that I had to learn to navigate. And for me, it was layered, because at that point and at that age, when I was coming to fruition with all of these things at 17 and later on in life, I was also later in life processing my own early childhood trauma, my own sexual trauma. And learning to see those different layers of the type of violation that does to you. Mm. My spirituality at that point felt broken. I knew that I had to, I knew that I had this relationship with God, and that was the most important thing for most, but I just could not merge the church and God together, because I was seeing it as one at the time. it's not how I see things now, but at the time it was just like I felt completely, mistrust. I don't trust any church. I don't trust any senior person that's going to come and tell me, that I was this terrible person for experiencing something that was totally normal, developmental.
Wow. Where are you today in your healing process? Take us to where you are today in your healing process, and how did you get to wherever you are today?
So I feel like it's been an everyday process for me, especially around reconnecting with that part of me that I know is there. It's like the foundation of my spirit, of who I am, like the core of who I am. And for me, one of the things that I've come to that's helped me begin the healing, because I feel like I'm just really honestly delving into the healing part of my spirituality, was during this whole COVID thing. The quarantine allowed me the opportunity to really reconnect again with God, and seeing it in the sense of the institution is separate from my relationship with God. I'm learning to look at the person, like whether it's the pastor or whoever's preaching through whatever thing I'm tuning into at the time, the churches that I look to tune into, and I'm looking at the message. I'm looking at what God is speaking to, is using this person as a vessel to speak to me in that moment. And I'm still working on that part. I started going hopping around and looking for a church in person that I felt like I could see myself there as a community, which is still a work in progress. It hasn't been something that I've been able to say I fundamentally found something and I'm going to continue to commit to it. I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
But right now it's me being able to come face to face and rekindle my relationship with God and look at him again, and just realize that, because one of the biggest things that I felt like I was struggling with was that I felt so much shame that I had turned my back on God, that I felt like he had ignored me. And I also looked at myself for a long time, and I also took responsibility in that, because I know deep down inside he was never turning his back on me. He's always been there for me. He has shown that to me through every step of my way, through my healing, through the fact that I have this amazing husband, I have this amazing son, I have an amazing career, I'm able to help people. He's been able to show me, I'm here for you, you're my daughter, I love you, and I'm just, whenever you're ready, I'm here for you. And that's how I feel about my relationship with God right now.
Wow. Sherry, that's a beautiful thing. That is a beautiful thing. And I'm so happy for you, because I know when we talked before, again, how much your relationship with God, how important that is to your foundation, your cornerstone. And now, again, you having a family, your husband, your child, and being able to share that faith. And shout out to your husband for being supportive, because I know when we talked through this, you said that the support of your husband has been monumental in that healing process.
Monumental. It is. Thank you so much. My husband has been the greatest blessing that God could have. I look at everything that I have gone through, and if there's any takeaway that I have is the blessing of this man. Because even though he can look at me and say, I don't get it, I wasn't raised in the church, I don't understand it, I think it's really fucking weird, sometimes he'll say, whatever you need, I'm going to be here for you, and whatever you need, take your time. You want to go to this church, you let me know when you want me to go with you, and we'll go together.
That's love. That's a good man, girl. Keep that good man.
Yeah. Yes, he is.
Listen, Sherry, you guys drive safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sharing. Y'all please give Sherry some hearts.
No, thank you.
Okay, and we'll catch up soon. All right.
Definitely.
All right now.
Much love.
Take care. Bye-bye. Yo, that's powerful. But you heard the layers of that, but did you pick out the piece on that? And this is how this works, though. In this indoctrination process, there was a time when she felt shame because she felt like she had turned her back on God, but understanding that the shame had started because individuals make themselves out to be God and to be the voice of God, and to say that if I say you are not this, if I say you are not valid, as somebody said, you don't need the church to validate, then that becomes the authority. And so then it makes people feel like, oh my gosh, I'm turning my back on God. But that's because individuals from day one have tried to make themselves God, and you're not God. Anyway, listen, let me stop. Okay, Cameron, are you in the building? Cameron, if you're not in the building yet, my brother, then I'm going to go back to My sister Cam, you are here, brother. So I'm coming to you right now. Listen, y'all, stick with me, stick with me. I see these comments. That's crazy. Jeez, I wish I had not to listen. My youth would be so dope. Oh my gosh. Individuals and their rules, traditions that aren't biblical. So true. Listen, I'm just, Cam, where you at, brother? Where you at? It says you're connecting. I'm gonna take a sip here. There he goes. There he goes. Can we hear you, brother?
Can you hear me?
Okay, all right.
Okay.
You got your glasses on, pretty?
Yes.
You ready? Can you see?
So I get.
All right. Listen.
I had to put on my glasses, y'all.
All
I'm
right.
sorry.
Listen, Cameron, thank you for coming on today, man. I appreciate you.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
Listen, we're going to
Thank
dive
you for
right
having
in
me.
because I don't want to cut off with the time. I want to have some time with you, and then we're going to go back to Reverend Kendra Frazier. So, Cameron and I were from the same place, Sacramento, California, right? Born and raised, okay? But you out in the Yay area right now in Oakland, California. Yes, sir.
Yes, I am.
Okay,
I
okay.
am.
Listen, Cameron, Reverend Kendra Frazier has already kind of talked about this piece on same gender loving and, you know, and understanding that a lot of the religious trauma that I deal with, you dealt with, she's dealt with, so on and so forth, has stemmed from this piece that said that God doesn't love gays, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so let's kind of dive right into your story. Just briefly tell us, like, what type of religious upbringing did you come from? Because I know you know, it was intense.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You know, I grew up apostolic.
Yeah.
Holiness. You know, holiness or hell. That's how I grew up.
Yeah.
I grew up holiness or hell.
Yeah.
And not only did I grow up apostolic, but my grandfather was the bishop, my father's pastor, my mom's evangelist, the whole family sings, the whole church is the family.
Yeah.
So you don't even get separate perspectives on sexuality. You also get the church is your family, so that's it. You know, some people can go to church, they get one perspective. Then you go home to family, you have that down-to-earth individual. I didn't have any of that, you know. It was religion, holiness or hell. And I remember from being 5 years old, 6 years old, I had my first crush, you know, as a little kid. And when it changed for me, my grandfather was preaching and he said, he preached a sermon on men liking men and how it's unholy. And it clicked for me. It was like, something's wrong with me? Like, I really started to think that. And then around 14, 15 years old, my father was in the kitchen with my grandfather's caretaker, and she had spent summer there, so she kind of knew, like, oh, you know, he's gay. You know, I hadn't had sex yet or anything, so I knew that I liked men, though. I was attracted to men. And I was involved in church. I knew I loved to sing. I loved to direct the choir and all these things, right? And she asked him, not knowing that I was on the other side of the kitchen wall, she asked him, what would you do if one of your sons were gay? Because there's three of us and I'm the youngest. And he replied to her by saying, I don't know what I would do. I would either try to kill them or kill myself.
Wait,
so
hold up. Don't fly over that. First of all, sir, I think your glasses are rubbing on the microphone because we can hear.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, there we go. It was giving us a little bit of rubbing there. But
some drums.
Yeah, right. We had a little backbeat. But you heard your father say, I don't know what I would do. Either I would kill myself or I'd kill
or try to kill
myself. Okay.
Yeah.
And you were how old at that time?
14.
You were 14. So at 14 years old, the man who seed gave you life, the man that I'm sure you looked up to in many ways, to hear him say that, and at this time you hadn't confirmed anything with anybody.
No, I hadn't spoken with anybody. I hadn't.
So what does that do to a 14-year-old you who already had these feelings, hadn't acknowledged anything yet, and to hear your father saying that, like, how was that?
I instantly thought to myself, I said, wow, you know, if my dad thinks this about me and he introduced me to Christ, then Christ must think this about me. God must think this about me. Like, this has to be the sin that they were talking about, the worst sin. This has to be the thing that is going to keep me from heaven.
So Cameron, how do you move forward from there? Where do you even go with that? Where do you even go with that?
Well, first, being in my teenage years, I escaped, I escaped from that. I got into track and field and was really good. And so that kept me from having to go to church on Sundays. I was running summer track. I also was a part of vocal ensemble at school and was singing in different areas. So it kept me, I didn't get to address it. It just kept me running and running and running and running and running. And I remember the first time I ever spoke about it, I was 16 and I was feeding my grandfather. And I told him, I was like, I feel like I'm attracted to men. And I was scared to say it, knowing that I was attracted. Looking back, knowing I was attracted, I approached it by saying, I feel.
Yeah.
You know? And so that kind of, helped, because I remember thinking his response was going to be so harsh, but he said, what? He was like, you got to handle that. And he was saying how I reminded him of one of my great aunts and that I was inclusive, believing in everybody going to heaven. But he was like, you need to work on that with yourself. And he never told me it was wrong or a problem. And that was the interesting part for me, And after that, I remember about to go to school and I told my father about it. And that was 2 years later. So in the meantime, every night I'm spending time waiting for everybody to go home, going into my secret closet and following, like Reverend Kendra was talking about, using the Bible to follow all of these instructions that have been taught to me. Go in your secret closet, trying to pray it away, looking for deliverance, not knowing that I already had the deliverance. It was for me to just love myself. But I'm looking for something else.
Cam, when we talk, you're gonna stop right there. Your deliverance that you were looking for was what?
Was already there. It was just me loving myself. It's like accepting you have this extra toolbox that no one else, this extra tool in your toolbox that no one else around you has. So they don't know how to receive it or pour into it. So I'm suffering and I'm crying. I'm thinking something's wrong with me. So I use school as an escape. So I moved, and I was so serious about moving to Oakland that I literally had $60 to my name. I was serious about running. I wanted to run. So I ran away, and I mean like $40 in my account and 20 in my pocket.
Yeah.
I went to go stay in the dorm, and I had to heal. I had to do work on my own. I started going to churches where I didn't know anyone so I could try to focus, because I remember that time it hit me, and Kendra said something so interesting where she had that conversation with God. It was like God was saying to me, you've been having a relationship with me through your parents and through these pastors around you. They were like your little pipeline. And so now you have to deal with me personally, And so I had to learn to love myself, do my own work, and start to heal, like bridge that gap between the hurt and the healing.
Cameron, I want to go to the piece, because not only did you heal, but you turned the pain, you turned the hurt, the trauma into something that would heal other people. What have you created? What is this now that is available for others to seek healing?
Well, I through my healing, I learned, I want to be the individual I needed when I was younger. I created a program called The Parent, the Child, and the Process. And using storytelling, using workshops, and using a panel, we have discussion. The whole point of the program is to address parent guardians and parents that are raising LGBT youth, and they're using religion as the sole guidance to raise these youth. And our goal is to strategically equip them with the tools so that they can foster growth between their relationship and within their child. So we have parents and children that come, and they have worked through their relationship. pastors that sit on the panel, inclusive pastors. We have licensed social clinical workers. We also have storytellers. So I tell my story. We have a parent that tells the story of how, you know, she used to be confused about her child and would whip the child and how he would walk. And then later on, she learned, you know, her religion came face to face with her reality when, you know, suicide was on the table. And so we talk about those things. We talk about preventative measures and preventing suicide and empowering our youth and empowering the parents to say, this is your child, love on them, you know, try to understand, you know, children are given to us to teach us lessons. So what is it that you need to learn from this individual, from your own child, you know? And so we take the time out for everyone to just have open dialogue that's not happening, that needs to happen. And we empower the youth to hold on to their faith. Because a lot of times, instead of running, you are preventing something that's going to happen anyway. You're going to have to heal. You're going to have to bridge that, you know, hurt and healing. I was reading an article the other day, and it said an individual at 90 years old came out, and it was religion and all the things that they saw around them going on and their family that kept them in the closet. And I remember Bishop Yvette Flunder saying, and she sat on one of the panels for Parent-Child Process, closets were not made to live in. They were made to store clothes and to store blankets. You don't belong in there. And anybody that sees you in there should come and get you. I got to put my blankets in there. You come out here with the rest of us. Yeah. And that's what we need. And we recognize in the program that titles have an influence on individuals. And so we have pastors that tell their own story that are like, you know, I used to gay bash, but 2 out of 3 of my children were secretly suffering because they were gay. And one of them I don't have anymore. We have these stories to bring reality face to face with your religions, to say, you know, lose all of that. Let's talk about faith. Let's talk about spirituality. Let's talk about building each other up, you know, and we include history in that, you know, give books, you know.
Cam, is this a program that is accessible like virtually so that anybody anywhere can get, how does this work?
We have done it live before.
Okay.
But we do it here in Oakland, California. We started at APEB, AIDS Project East Bay, under Executive Minister Robert Knowles. And that helped as well. Imani Community Church was a part of it. And so we're going to do another one at the end of this year into next year. And so it's something I'll be sure to let everyone know, and they can get involved and learn the strategies.
Where can they find you? Because I know people are already like, yo, they like, you done found your calling, brother. Like they want to, I'm sure people want to know, where's the best place that they can contact you to like find out more, get more information? Because I'm already prophesying this thing is going to have to go nationwide, brother. Like what's happening?
You can find me on Instagram, it's Cam the Mayor, and on Facebook, Cameron Crump, CAMRYN CRUMP, and also by email, crump.cameron@gmail.com.
Yeah. Cameron, it's good to see you, man. Good to catch up.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, for sure. I love this. Great conversation.
Listen, let me say this, man. I am proud of you, man. I'm proud of you and the work that you're doing. And I'm grateful to God that you've been able to use your pain and the trauma and the experience that you had and have turned that through your healing into something that now heals the masses, man. Like that's a beautiful thing.
Thank you.
So
that means a lot. Thank you.
Love you, brother.
Love you too.
All right, man. Take care. Yo, y'all, I'm going to quickly come back to Reverend Kendra. My boy Cam, listen, y'all, please hit him up because there's a resource. Listen, we got 3 minutes, but I just, do you have just some closing thoughts, just some things that you were thinking about? I saw you in the comments there. What you've heard on these 2 individuals?
Wow, Sherry and Cam both blessed me. So grateful for their testimonies and their intentionality around their own healing and their courage to be authentically who they are. Which is what many of us need, particularly now. I thought about talking more about how LGBTQ folks are disenfranchised by the church, particularly because you use all our gifts and want to keep us in the closet.
That
So,
part.
Look, I wanted to say that earlier. We could come back and talk about that for an hour or two.
Yeah.
What I want to offer in closing is that it is so important to not fast forward over trauma. Most Black and brown people do, and LGBTQ folks do it as well, because we've become so accustomed to normalizing our trauma. It is important for those of you that may have heard some of the causes of religious trauma syndrome to go and seek a mental health professional, a life coach, someone that can companion with you in the midst of the hurt, in the midst of the pain, and in the midst of the trauma, because this is a lot. And our traumas and our grief and our woundedness, if we do not heal, will only become exacerbated, particularly during this season, because this is the season of high spirituality as well as high trauma. And for those of us who are connected, you already know we must do the work that our souls require of us. There's no way that we can get around it in this season. We must do our work.
Listen, we got 30 seconds. Where can they find you? Because people need to know. You mentioned Movement Mondays. Where else? Where can they find you?
Movement Mondays at 10 a.m. If you're here in Harlem or the surrounding areas, every Thursday at 7:30 a.m. we have a stoop side service, so you all can come and check us out. We are socially distanced, and I'm giving an inspirational word. The service doesn't last any more than an hour. It's on 120th between 5th and Lenox, right in the middle of the block. You can follow me on Facebook at Kendra. That's Kendra with a Y, Kyndra. Last name Frazier, Frazier. My company, Kind Consulting. Kind, the first 4 letters of my name stands for Knowing Yourself in Need of Devotion. We will have our website up and ready by mid-September.
Listen, September, y'all follow her. I got 7 seconds left. Come back next week. Thank you to everybody. We'll see you next week, y'all.
Listen, I don't know about you, but having that conversation about healing church hurt hits home. It hits home because there's so many people who all they want to do is to feel the love of God. And unfortunately, because of people, right, and people's misunderstanding of God's love and misunderstanding of how God loves, has the ability to turn people away and to traumatize individuals. And so I'm so grateful to have had that conversation and to now be hearing it again with Pastor Kendra Frazier. And also, once again, I want to thank Sherry. I want to thank Cameron for coming on and sharing their stories of trauma, but then also their triumph and their healing. And so to them, I send love. To all of you, I send love. I send healing. I just send acceptance. I send a spirit of worthiness over you. Let me stop. I'm gonna get to prophesying over y'all, but I seriously think that this is a conversation that we are definitely going to continue into 2021, and we are going to continue to uplift the love of God in a real way. I'm gonna stay out of that. Anyway, as I always say, I want to thank everybody who is involved in tonight's episode. I want to thank my producer, Julius. Thank you, sir. You make this look easy, but it's not. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in. Again, we'll only have 2 more episodes left in the month of December and in the year of 2020. So please keep coming back, like, share, and subscribe. We're here every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. So make sure you spread that message. And then also, we've got that Facebook group that I'd like you to join so we can continue that conversation. Please be safe out there. Have a wonderful rest of your week and into your weekend. And to everyone, happy holidays. I'll see you next week. Oh, make sure that you log online for our 10-minute talk back. Every Friday morning on IG Live and Facebook Live, I come on and we talk about some, elements from this episode. So just make sure that you check us out on the 10-minute talk back on Fridays. Okay, I'm done. As I always say, have a good night.